Okay, welcome back. We're here with our expert for today for the GAB Lab, Taunya Richardson. So happy to have you here. And today we're talking about pricing that packs a punch and pricing strategies, which is something that entrepreneurs struggle with from the very beginning of building a business plan, even up until when you get your business rolling. It's something that you have to keep coming back to over and over again because economy changes, our costs change. Pricing strategy is something you can't just set and forget. You got to keep working at it. So we already covered your strategic selection in segment 1, and now we're in segment 2, and we're working on the weighted pricing process. Now explain to us what that means and why it's important.
All right. Well, weighted pricing process, this is exactly what it is that we're going to do. It's a process. It's a 4-step process, super simple. So I'll run through the 4 steps, but don't worry, I'm going to go through all of them in detail. The first one is to assess or to research the competition, know what it is that they're selling. And let me just say, this has to be done for each product again. So when you're researching competition, don't research the competition based on your business, research the competition based on your product, right? So we're looking for competition based on product. So you're going to research the competition, then you're actually going to define the criteria that the customer is using to decide whether or not to buy that product. Not your criteria, their criteria. And then the third step is that you're going to actually score your product or service. And then the 4th step is you're going to set your price. So that's the process. And why we do this is because, as we mentioned, you brought it up in the first episode, usually business owners are basing their price on what the competition is doing. And why that is
harmful. Why is that a bad idea? I actually remember from the very first time I saw you at your Nail the Numbers boot camp, you were talking about this, and you were talking about how it's so common for other entrepreneurs to just go based on what everybody else is charging when you have no idea what their overhead might be, what their product costs are, what their wage costs are. But yet it's like we think, well, if that's what the market is, if that's what they're charging, they must know better than I do. And you take that as law. So why is that so wrong, and how do we change that?
Well, because we've got a business failure rate. I mean, I'm not even going to talk about COVID because we just saw everybody like fall like flies in the first 2 weeks of COVID, right? Yeah. It just distress all over. And that's because businesses didn't have a net profit. They didn't have a net profit. Our failure rate was close to 90% before COVID over 5 years. 90% of businesses don't survive year 5, and 71% of those failures are because of poor financial management. Right. So if we've got the vast majority, in my experience, is 83% of businesses that are generating less than a 3% net profit, this is why businesses collapse, because they don't have retained earnings to keep them alive through economic turmoil. And so now when we base our price on a company that has a net profit of less than 3%, this is where a whole community starts to fall.
It's right? Like the blind leading the blind, really.
The domino, because we're not doing the numbers, we're not doing the math. And, you know, I think, why do people do it? One, because it's easy, quite honestly. I think it's an easy thing to do. Let me just go see what the competition is charging. That must be what the market demand is. But from a neuroscience perspective, when we start looking at behavioral finance, I actually think that it avoids us from doing the uncomfortable work, which is actually charging what the product is worth.
And that's where we get into the psychology behind money and pricing, which is so mind-blowing.
Yeah, there's one of those mic drops, right? So in my experience in working with women entrepreneurs, 87% of women entrepreneurs skew money martyr. So there's a money type quiz that I'll put it in the show notes below, but a money type quiz that, you know, you invest 5 minutes of your time and it's going to show you what money types are coming up in your life, in your business, that are sabotaging your success. So what martyrdom has to do on pricing is that usually everyone else comes first, make the customer happy, make the supplier happy, make sure the staff are happy. Everyone else comes first, we'll come last. So that usually affects our pricing strategy. It affects whether or not we pay ourselves, right, as entrepreneurs in the business. So I mentioned that just as a note to, to take the money type quiz if this is you. So this is why we actually do the weighted pricing process, because for the first time, you're actually able to clearly see the value of the product or service that you're offering. And then the uncomfortable part is actually charging what the value actually is, what it's worth. So
yeah.
And sometimes too in coffee shops, when we start looking at baked goods and lattes, right, again, it's easier just to go with the competition, but especially inputs on coffee, right, the coffee beans and the milk and all those commodities go up and down, and the labor that goes in and the whip.
Well, this is where I went so wrong at the beginning. Talk about 6 years ago, and I was building my business plan, and I mentioned earlier that my pricing strategy was to go into other coffee shops and basically just take a screenshot, take a picture of what they were charging, and it's like, well, that's what they're charging, that's what I should charge. But I guarantee you that my costs are a lot different than Tim Hortons. My beans are a lot different than Tim Hortons. My wages, everything is different. So why would I charge the same? Yeah, it's because I didn't want to do the uncomfortable work of actually figuring out the value of the product that I would be offering.
Brilliant. That's it. Exactly, Andrea. So everybody listening, definitely, hear that honesty that Andrea's just shared with you, because this is where so many business owners get stuck. So let's look at step one. You're going to have to just research the competition and the product that they're selling, not the business, right? The competition. So before I forget, if you check on the show notes below, again, there's another worksheet, and you're gonna use this worksheet for the entire 4-step process. So one worksheet per product or service, and you're gonna see that right on it is gonna say, step number 1, research your competition. You put the company name, you put the product that you're actually looking at. You're going to do an assessment of its strengths and weaknesses, right? Like, what is it really great at? What doesn't it do so well? And if you can, features and benefits, right? It's got all these bells and whistles, so you kind of know what's happening there. And then the last piece is that you put the price. So what is the price that competitor is charging for that product or service? And then just a note on pricing is you want to make sure that you're comparing apples with apples. So, if you're deciding that you're going to go with a price that's based on an hourly rate, use hourly for all of it, and then use hourly for your service. If it's a product, are they selling 1 or is it a multiple of 6, right? So maybe just, doing a division and saying unit cost per product is this. So I'm just going to throw that out as a little caveat, because you want to make sure that you're weighing all of these units equally, right? Apples to apples, oranges to oranges. So weighing the competition, pretty straightforward, and I would suspect it's probably very easy for everyone to do, because that's probably where they've already gotten their price. So I don't see this being too labor intensive. Okay, now this is where we have to screw our head on a little differently, because now we actually have to define the criteria. So Andrea, if it's okay with you, I'm going to share my screen, because I want to, this one, everyone needs to wrap their head around, and it's a little different. So I wonder if I can, no, I'm not going to do this right now, because it's just going to confuse the issue. So here's what I want to talk about is when you're choosing your criteria, this again is going to be how the customer, what the customer is asking themselves to decide whether or not to buy this product or service, right? So what are the top questions? Now, I wouldn't pick more than 6. And what I do want to state here is that everyone should have different criteria. I'm actually going to go through some examples here, but these examples won't fit every single product or service. So you have to think through this. If you have to recruit a friend, recruit a client to ask them what they went through. But here in this step, I'm going to, what am I going to suggest? I'm actually going to take a look at environmental consulting, because this was actually what this example was built on. So let's say we've got someone out there that's doing environmental consulting and they're trying to figure out this criteria. Examples of criteria in a service-based business might be soft skills. Soft skills are people skills, project management skills. How great are they at the team leadership, right? And bringing together a whole bunch of experts to deliver a specific product or service. Mm-hmm. Hard skills might be technical expertise. So if you're a mediator, right, how many years have you been doing it? If you're an environmental consultant, how many years have you been doing it? What are your degrees? What are your diplomas? What are your accolades, right? Putting all of that together. Industry experience, how many years have you actually been delivering this service? Putting that out there. Brand promise, this is basically, and yeah, I'm going to use this as an example. I'm trying to think about brand names right now, but are you a dollar store or are you a Holt Renfrew? Hopefully everybody knows what a Holt Renfrew is. It's kind of like our premium, department store outlet, like Nordstrom's, Saks Fifth Avenue, right? It's like top of the line or dollar store. Where does your brand fit? And it's not to say that one is bad and one is good, right? But dollar store, low value, but high quantity, right? And people will go in there and they'll drop $150 on garbage that they won't see for another year, right? And
the interesting thing is that's their brand promise and they deliver on it.
Exactly. Yes. So understanding what that looks like. And then the unique offering. I also call this noise. So how much competition is there out there, right? In environmental services, there's probably not a ton. I bet you it's growing, right? When I first started this 7 years ago, there were not a lot of environmental consultants, but that noise definitely is growing. And every year, this is why you want to come back to it, because the more fires we have, the more floods, the more hurricanes, the more tornadoes, right? The more minus 45 and plus 42, people are going to start waking up, but more noise is going to happen as well. Mm-hmm. And then to that point is this other point here, which is pain point. So do you remember we were talking about solutions in the first segment? This is where this comes in. Are you a Band-Aid to a scratch or are you saving a life? Yeah. Right? So the second step in this is to figure out what questions are they asking. I'm going to turn this off for a minute. Bear with me here. In a product-based business, as an example, they would be very different questions. It might be the quality of the ingredients being used in your lattes. Right? The quality of ingredients being used in a soap product or a candle, right? How good are they? Where are they sourced from?
The speed on which we can deliver the product.
So that's another point, right? That would be another point. Accessibility. So can I get it now or do I have to wait a month, right? Yeah. Is it in stock or not? That's probably another piece with product. This one is interesting because brand reputation, right? So brand promise, again, are you a dollar store? Are you a Holt Renfrew? But I am going to mention this right here. And it's interesting. I'm going to ask you, Andrea, actually, because I know we at one point were talking about cakes and baked goods and then being able to deliver those to markets outside of your rural community.
Yeah.
Do you feel because you're a rural business, you should be charging less? Or more? Did that ever kind of factor in?
That's really interesting because it's kind of that psychological warp there because we are out here. It costs more to get product here. It costs more to get your product out. You have a smaller customer base, so you have to factor in all that. But because we're a small town and you know everybody, it's like you feel guilty almost. There's that guilt and martyrdom coming back. You feel guilty charging what it's worth because it's like, well, it's not their fault that we live way out here. You have to factor in all of these things as a rural entrepreneur and add that into your price as well. Yeah.
Oh, we could be on this topic for a long time because there's so many facets to it. So there's a couple things. If you're really uncomfortable charging a larger or higher price, right, for your community potentially, they could come into the shop and then buy what they need to buy, right, at the price that you're comfortable charging them for it, but definitely factor in your costs. You cannot do the martyrdom thing. You cannot be out of pocket. You need to price based on its value.
It took me a few years to learn that.
Yeah, and it's uncomfortable, right?
Yeah.
And just so you know, like when you start doing the uncomfortable work, this is when you know that you're actually starting to rewire your programming and your mindset. And that's the gift in discomfort. So for anybody who's curious out there listening, that is the bonus in that. But here's what I find fascinating. So I have a client, I won't use their name, but they sell maple syrup. And this is just a different perspective because every single coin has two sides. So in Quebec, their rural communities are called townships. And they have this prestige to being in a township, right? Or a little hamlet here in Saskatchewan, there's a prestige. And what they have been able to do is they have been able to market based on the prestige of being in a township. So what they've done is that this company is actually based in the township of this, right? And they've got this amazing packaging that really just speaks to, they're the Holt Renfrew of maple syrup. But for their bottle, they charge $25, where their competition, you go into Loblaws and it's $9.99. Now they factor in all of their costs, but what I'm really trying to stress here is that rural can actually be an advantage. It can have a prestige and a cachet to it. Sometimes when you're in the middle of it, you don't see it like that, but look for the silver lining in all of that, which can then influence the price. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does make sense. And it's all about changing the perspective. For
Yes.
sure.
Yes. Get outside of your bubble. So other criteria, again, noise in market, even with products, right? Are there 1,000 coffee shops out there, or are there 2, right? How much competition is actually out there? And then again, always the pain point, especially in COVID. Is this a scratch or is this life-saving, right? Because people want you to show up powerfully, and this is where we have the opportunity to do it. And, I'm going to speak to here before I move on to price theory. I'm going to give you one more example because I want to show you how different criteria can be. So I have a client that has a children's entertainment center, and it's like one of those big, huge square footage, whatever it is. I think it's 20,000 square feet. And their criteria really didn't fit anything that we talked about. What they ended up going with and how they did this is that they polled their customers. What's most important to you, right? Yeah. Give us your top 3. So they found out what was most important, and then they put all of that list together, and then they sent out a second poll, and they asked their customers to score them on a score of 1 out of 5, which will take a second step. But what their criteria ended up being: safety and security, cleanliness, the cool factor, cool and fun, diversity of offerings, including food and concession, and convenience. So you can see that, this criteria, I don't want people to get stuck, because in the playbook, you can download the playbook below. It's going to say, here's sample criteria for services, here's sample criteria for products. I don't want you to get stuck doing the easy stuff and just saying, well, I'm just going to use the samples that Taunya gave us, right? Think it through, because otherwise you won't be scoring your product or service properly.
Exactly, and that's where we talk about having a different perspective. You don't know what you don't know, and you can't just build it and they will come. You have to actually do the work and figure out who you're selling things to. Yes. And that's genius. I love that, because who better than to tell you if you're hitting the bar than the people you want coming in?
Yes, exactly. Beautiful. Yeah, that's your intel right there, right? You've got a gold mine, use it. Use that intel. Yeah. Okay, I am going to, sorry, Andrea, I'm going to share my screen again just for this last piece, which is now you have to score yourself. So again, if you can, I would recruit team members, maybe not family, but team members, clients, a partner in business, someone who's objective, right? Otherwise, you're great at everything you do. No room for improvement. And all you're going to do is you're going to score yourself 1 out of 5, right? On each product or service. So 1 is weak and 5 is strong. And in this example, you'll see here soft skills. This individual said, well, not really great with people skills, so I'm going to give myself a 3. Hard skills, the technical skills, like the knowledge behind it, very strong. They gave themselves a 4. Industry experience, they gave themselves a 4. They've been in it for 25 years. They had, witnessed a plethora of different issues and challenges. Brand promise, they gave themselves a 5 because they were promising the world, right? We are going to give you everything. And a lot of customers, a lot of business owners will say this, won't they? We're the best at what they do. We're the best at what we do. Best service, best delivery, best price, best. And then they come in and they're like, we're 3 here, we're a 2 here. So incongruent.
That's why I love the idea of what you mentioned of getting your customers or your potential customers to actually answer that question, because we're never fully objective on ourselves. Never.
Yes. And I won't get into genders here, but some genders tend to not give themselves enough credit. And sometimes other people will give themselves way too much credit.
Exactly.
Right? So
exactly.
It's always good to have an objective opinion here.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can see in the unique offering, they scored themselves a 4 because there wasn't a lot of competition in environmental services at this stage. And then pain point, this is interesting because at the time we did this, it was 3. There wasn't, people were like, well, you know, is global warming actually even a thing? You know, are we in the middle of a crisis? I don't think so. I think this year, you probably find a lot more people thinking we better get on to this, right? Like, so every year the pain point goes up. So this is why you kind of want to take a look at this each year to go, are we still at these numbers or do we adjust our price?
Well, and talk about adjusting. That's what you talk about is so important, is to factor this in seasonally too, to not just set it and forget it, because the pain point is something that also changes seasonally for a lot of products and services.
Brilliant. Absolutely, Andrea. Absolutely. You bet. Okay, so now the second part of this scoring piece is that now once you have scored yourself, right, we've got to actually get your tally. So very easy, and it's in the playbook, the notes, step by step, how to do it. But you're going to add up all of your scores. You can see if we add these all up, we get a 23. You take your 23, you divide it by 6, equals a 4. Now what we have to do is we go back up to the competition, and we say on the low end of the spectrum, the lowest price that a competitor was charging was 25, and the highest price was 125. And then you're going to break that down for each one of these markers. Marker 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Again, all the instructions are in the playbook, so I'm not going to go through and explain that, but it's very easy. You add, and divide by 2. Add, and divide by 2. And then you set your price, right? It's if you know you're a 4, and if the marker for 4 is $100, in this case, this is an hourly rate, this individual should be charging $100 for environmental services. And Andrea, when I do this, I'm going to turn this off now. Every time, not once, well, maybe, yeah, there actually was 1 or 2 times, but every time I do that exercise with a client, they have always been undercharging, always. Usually,
that doesn't surprise me.
So I'm curious, Andrea, we're talking about custom cakes, right? And we're talking about undervaluing our product and our service. And then I know that you know, with custom cakes, this is something that you experienced when you were going out there.
Yes, actually, because I opened my business as a cake shop originally. And the funny thing is that over time, I was becoming completely burnt out because I was undercharging for my product and basing that charge based on what I thought other people would pay, and then getting mad and getting frustrated and overwhelmed that I couldn't make enough money to make it worth it when that was the price I was actually giving. Yeah. I had actually a lot of customers that were begging me after I quit doing cakes, I'll give you anything. I'll pay you whatever you need to make this cake for me. But by that time, I completely burnt myself out and overwhelmed myself because I had for so long been doing a job undercharging for it that it made me resentful and made me want to quit doing it. So my cake shop turned into a coffee shop because for all those years I had been undercharging which was my own fault. I had customers willing to pay, but because I was undervaluing myself and putting myself into the minds of my customers when I really didn't know. Had I done market research, had I done a poll, had I done a survey, I might have found that I actually could charge more for my services. But because I was assuming, I ended up completely burning myself out and stopping doing the cakes as a whole just because I was undercharging for my services the whole time.
Yeah, I think that's such an important point, because I think that, we come from this perspective of, I don't want to charge either because we're not seeing the value, or because we don't want to make it tough on the customer, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes there's two coins there. And unfortunately, what happens is that we compromise ourselves, not just because of the price, but our bottom line is impacted. And then we're compromising the business, we're compromising our financial security at home. And then obviously that then trickles down into compromising our employees and compromising the customer, because we won't stay in business. And this is exactly what you're talking about experiencing. You get burnt out, and it fizzles out. So pricing, so key. And we're going to talk about this in the next episode, but the value of what comes out of this exercise is immense, because now you see the price that you need to be charging, but you're able to defend why it is that price, right?
That's the most important thing, is being able to actually validate your own value.
Yeah. Well, yes. And you just, you bring up, I wanted to catch that word, because, and I do this too. We see our offering as an extension of ourselves, especially when we're solo entrepreneurs and just starting out. And your language there around calculating or sharing your value, right? It's not my value. It's the value of the product or service. The product.
But as entrepreneurs, as I think this is sometimes, like you said, martyrdom of a female thing. Like we tend to do this a lot too.
Get it. Yeah.
Tie ourselves up in identity of the business, identity of the product, and unable to separate the two.
Yeah. Well, you nailed it there. And so I think, please, everybody listening, go down below, download the playbook, download the worksheets, get this exercise done. The key takeaway from this one is, again, you're going to be able to set your price. So the 4-step process: know your competition, understand the criteria based on what's going on in the client's head when it comes to making the decision, score yourself objectively, and now set the price. You're going to see it on the scale. Join us for the next episode, because the next episode I want to show you how to reap the rewards of this. There's a lot of rewards in this process, but I also want to talk to you about cost of goods. We're not going into detail, but it's definitely an important conversation that we need to have before you set this price. So thanks for watching. Thanks again to our episode champion and friends over at Community Futures Parkland and the Hub program. We so appreciate you and the work that you do, and we'll catch you in the next episode. Bye for now.